Hey guys, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Witch on the Holy Night. So last episode we finished up the first part, I guess, of episode 5. Aoko finally defeated the puppet, but yes, another person showed up, Alice, and she is much more dangerous. So we started episode 5.2, episode 5 part 2 last time as well. So let's continue and let's see what happens today.
Bingo. ここならスナーク化しないんだ.
After assessing the current state of the enemy, Aoko sat herself under the counter.
あいつらは
店の周りで地団打踏んでるわ。理由があってね。あいつらはここには入ってこられないのよ。
Aoko gave the perplexed Sojiro a grin and took a deep breath. She heaved a heavy sigh of relief and fatigue.
とりあえずコーヒーブレイクね。ここは遊園地の中でも遊びのない場所だから、あいつらにとっては鬼門なのよ。レジスターも調理器具も最近のものだし、擬人化されたマスコットもないし、スナーク化するにはちょい文明犬すぎるってこと。
スナーク？
あいつらの名前よ。つけたのは私じゃなくてアリスなのかしらね。あの子の性格的にちょっと想像できないけど、まあとにかくそういう名前。
Perhaps now at ease from knowing they were safe, Sojiro seemed enthralled in her explanation. Aoko could not help but chuckle as Sojiro nodded sagely. It was certain that he had no idea what she was talking about. Normally this would have irritated her, but this time she was grateful for the warmth of his strange sobriety.
それはともかく調子良さそうだな、青崎。
Mistaking her smile for composure, Sojiro broke into a smile himself. It was just another link in a chain of misunderstandings, but there was no need to redress it.
あれ？あなたから見てもわかる？私の魔弾の威力が上がっているの。
そりゃミラーハウスで散々追いかけ回されたからな。あの時と同じ動作なのに物騒さが増していれば嫌でもわかる。でもいいのか？確か数に限りがあるとか言ってただろう。もう随分撃っちまったけど。20…
あんた時々あれよね。
ん？
Her opinion of him improved just a little bit.
なんでもない。私の魔弾の威力が上がっているのは単純に魔力の濃度の問題。さっきから霧がかかってるでしょ？あれ全部魔力なのよ。弾を撃つための燃料と思って。
Magical energy was divided into two broad categories. First was OD, produced inside a mage's body. Second was mana, which filled the atmosphere. So, I don't know why the music is kinda low. I did not change it though. Yeah, look at this. I did not change any of it. But it's quite low for some reason. At the moment, the amusement park had turned into a fairy tale land overflowing with mana. Although it meant nothing to the average person, to a mage it was a paradise where spells could be cast as much as one pleased.
じゃあ残り魔力とやらは気にしなくていいのか。注意すべきは怪我と体力だけ。
まあ個人的な責任においてはその限りね。
Sojiro breathed a sigh of relief. From Sojiro's perspective, more so than the monster she mowed down, Aoko was the biggest bully on the playground. He had been concerned about what would happen should her magical energy be exhausted, but luckily for him, she was far from surrendering her crown.
頼りにしてくれるのは嬉しいけど、ぬか喜びよ。あんな雑魚たち、ただ動いているだけのガラクタなんだから。スナーク本体は当然として、アリスが他の童話の怪物を出してきたら、私じゃどうにもならない。
他の童話の怪物？遊園地をこんな風に変えたやつ以外にまだいるのか？
I mean, we've seen not a lot, right? But when we first saw Alice fight, she had, I guess, the Twiddledum kind of fairy tale creature there, right? Or will we see it this time around? We're gonna find out.
そう、プロイキッシャーって名付けられた私たちでさえ目を背けたくなる反則。不可能な夢物語をも再現する時代に取り残されたデタラメよ。
Sojour's expression seemed to be calling her out on the hypocrisy.
あのね、私たちはちゃんと現代に寄り添った魔術師よ。できないこともあるし、当たり前のことだけど、近代兵器にはかなわない。20世紀、まあいろんな戦争の後押しで兵器の進化は私たちを超えちゃったから。けどあの子のは違う。どんなに人間の技術が進歩しようと関係ないって怪物なの。例えばあのブレッドマンいるでしょ。あいつには自動拳銃とか効かないわよ。多分意味が分かっていないから。
Aoko casually gestured outside past the counter.
アリスの使い魔は全てが空想によってこねられた神秘なの。前提からしてありえないことだから、通常の物理法則と折り合いが悪い。空想と現実は両立しないっていうごく当たり前の理由でね。
なるほど。ブレッドマンってのはあの動く焼きたてパンのことなんだな。
Sojuro seemed to have ignored the majority of Aoko's explanation and only reacted to the part that caught his curiosity.
話を戻すけど、あいつらと近代兵器の相性は最悪。ロケット弾でも効果はないわ。意思の疎通、秩序の共有ができてないから。
So the only way to defeat these things is basically using magic, I guess, right?
プロイキッシャーにとって彼らの世界には存在しないもの、意味がわからないものは触れることなく無賛する。彼らに通じるのは同じ神秘を帯びた魔力だけっていうデタラメぶりよ。もう完全に概念空間っていうか概念宇宙っていうか。
So Sojuro cannot do anything here then.
要するにあいつらは伝承防御っていう特別なルールを持っていて、単純に強い力、強い魔術じゃ効果は薄いの。元になった童話にちなんだ欠点をつかないと倒せない。ギリシャ神話のアキレスあたり分かりやすい例えなんだけど、知ってる？
Sojuro shook his head.
そう、無事帰れたら飛び丸あたりに教えてもらって。定番だけどいい話よ、あれ。
Sojuro was feeling pretty lost, but he did his best to grasp the situation. He thought that the ploy kickshaws were scary enough to chase Aoko and that the puppet from before out of the house barefoot. Certainly, the scene before them was the stuff of nightmares. I mean, look at that horse. I think Alice made it much more scarier, right? But Sojuro had a different way of thinking.
やっぱり青崎の方が怖くないか。
Ooh, I'm gonna guess Aoko's face is gonna be like annoyed again.
あんた死ぬの？
I told you, look at that face. Sojuro waved in protest, silently pointing out that she had made this case for him.
あのね、今私たちを取り囲んでるのはおまけに過ぎないの。アリスにとってあのブレッドマンもロブスターもソーセージ屋のミンチマシーンも全部が全部私が打ってる魔弾より価値がない。いい？あの動くマスコットたちはね、ただのおまけなの。アリスが解放した童話の怪物の一呼吸みたいなものなのよ。
呼吸ってこれが？
私だって考えたくないわよ。でもそれが現状。たった一体の童話の怪物だけで私たちは手一杯。そういうわけだから アリスがあと1体でも追加したら諦めて。
追加って、これに制限はないのか？
あの子が出し惜しみしなければまだ何体かストックはあるでしょうけど、まあ成立する条件はあるわね。例えば川がないと目を覚まさない怪物もいる。この遊園地噴水はあるけど川はないでしょ。元になった童話縛りなの、あの子の使い魔は。
童話ってかけそばとか？
ここに川がないのは不幸中の幸いね。もしあったらもっと直接制圧に向いたやつが出てきてた。
Small mercy that there's no river here. Aoka continued, completely ignoring Sojiro.
話の続きだけど、アリスの魔術の基本はマザーグース。
The foundation of
知らないか。
Alice's. Okay.
イギリスの歌で遊び心に富んだメルヘンチックな内容よ。ただそっち系のプロイキッシャーは怖くないの。みんなそれなりになんとか魔術にも落とし込める範囲だから。
聞きたくないんだけど、そっち系じゃないのは？
マザーグースを下地にしたとある創作童話系。あの子のお母さんが好きでね。こっち系のはどいつもこいつも尋常じゃない。私たちから見ても勘弁してって言いたくなるわ。でこの遊園地を生き返らせたのはこっち系よ。多分フラットスナークってやつだと思う。私も聞き流していたから詳しくはわからないけど。
Sojiro swallowed the discomfort making its way up his throat. He really wanted her to explain things a little less vaguely, but something she had just said necessitated further investigation. Sorry.
待て青崎、あの子の話を聞き流したってなんで？
いや説明してもらったのは随分と前だし、あの頃はアリスの話あんまり信じられなかったのよね。私が素人だと思って大げさに自分の魔術を語ってくれてるな、舐められてるなとか。
In truth, if anyone hadn't taken the lesson seriously, it was Aoko. She would learn that the lesson firsthand soon enough when she experienced just how real Alice's monsters were. She'd also discover how heretical the Mainster witches truly were in the world of magecraft.
その聞き流した内容は？
何でも強力な結界を張るプロイだって。アリスが受け継いだプロイは山ほどあるけど、その中でもえりすぐりの一つよ。捨てられたもの、忘れられたものを童話的に蘇らせるやつで、今まで誰も破ったことがないとか。それでついたあだ名が触れられぬもの。
フラットスナークじゃないのか？
それもあだ名。とにかく正体がわからないやつばっかりなんで、一つの個体に複数の名前が付けられるの。フラットスナークはその中でも正体不明さはトップランクのデタラメぶりよ。あなたルイス・キャロルのスナーク狩りって本知ってる？
いや、そもそもルイス・キャロルというのは。
Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland.
そっからか。ドジスン教授はそうね、特殊性癖を持った妄想紳士ってとこ。まあこっちは別にどうでもいいか。人によっては時間の無駄だろうし。今重要なのは彼が残した著作の方。スナーク狩りはね、スナークって呼ばれる正体不明の怪物を捕まえようと奔走する冒険家たちの話なの。 キャロルらしい、皮肉ばっちり、支離滅裂、意味不明、結末不在の本当に困った本で、一行は島で苦しみつつ、最終的にはスナークを見つけるものの、見つけたベイカーは唐突に姿を消して終わってしまう。よくわからないもの探しに奔走する人間の風刺なんだけど、この遊園地において誰がベイカーで何がスナークかは言うまでもないでしょ。
Okay. Aoko elected not to share this, but Flat Snark had other popular names as well. The Enigmatic Island, the Five-Dimensional Plane. These names were not given to it by Alice, but rather muttered by mages whom the Mindsters defeated. In mathematics, snark is a term used in a graph theory to refer to the contradictory and impossible planar graphics. A plane proven to be unable to exist in this world was given the name apt for an ill-fated existence, paradoxical in nature. A fairy tale monster ascribed this name was said to hold no form discoverable by man. Aoko also declined to mention something else. Flat Snark was a fairy tale monster that could grow. It would hide somewhere in the amusement park, continuously exhaling magical energy until the park completely transformed into a fantasy land. Okay, so we need to find that.
脅かしてもしょうがないし。
何か言ったか？
別に。簡単に言って、童話世界の再生がフラットスナークの力なの。この遊園地との相性は抜群でしょうね。何しろ元々が童話を元にした遊び場だから。
If this had been a business district, for example, Flat Snark would have posed far less of a threat. At most, its power would be limited to projecting the shadow of a dinosaur onto a building window's pane.
お、だからここは安全だって。ん？
Soldier realized that something was wrong when he noticed a glutinous liquid dripping onto his back. I like his face like this. He looked up in the ceiling. Their eyes met. Before he had a chance to think, Soldier hopped up from the floor. Taking the initiative, he jumped out from behind the counter. Yeah, what did he see? What? Busy trying to stop him from committing an act of suicide, she also came to her feet. Immediately, she noticed something being brought to life overhead. Yeah, we saw some eyes. Okay. So the place that they were became alive, is that it? The gargantuan mouth clamped shut. With no mascot to speak of, the burger joint itself began to transform into one giant monster.
もう、なんで天井にピエロの絵なんて描いてんのよ、あの店。普通もっと違うところに労力割かない？そんなにピエロが好きなら入り口にでも飾っとけ。
Aoko aired out her grievances as she ran. There was no safe haven left. Moment by moment, the last remnants of civilization were being eroded away by fairy tales. Jesus. The amusement park had reached the final stage of snarkification. It was not just the mascot characters that had been granted life. Like the burger joint, even the buildings had begun to transform. The roller coaster had made its way about the park, writhed and twisted like a Chinese dragon. What do you call the dragon again in Alice? Jabberwocky? Something like that, right? Aoko and Sojiro stared dumbfounded by the Ferris wheel, which had grown to over 250 feet in height. Hordes of breadmen closed in on them as if to offer tickets.
この列整理は間に合ってるっての。
Mobs of trinkets, actually kickshaws, rampaged the park. Whenever a hole was punched in the envelopment, it was instantly filled. It was a battle of attrition with no end in sight. But that was a matter of course, as there were few fairy tales about limited sources.
なんかどうしようもないぞ。こいつら増える一方だ。
スナーク本体を探して。童話の怪物には本体に当たる器物があるの。それさえ壊せば遊園地から出られるはず。
本体ってどんな？
さっき言ったでしょ。童話の怪物は現実にないものだって。今までいなかったおかしなやつとか現実じゃありえないもの、それが本体。
おかしなやつって例えば？
だから命のある人形とか空飛ぶゴーカートとか。
Aoko paused her firing for a moment. After saying this out loud, she realized just how deep their grave was dug. The amusement park was a treasure trove of fairy tale-esque creatures on any given day. Who could say that was impossible amidst the newly transfigured knickknacks running around?
そっか、おかしくないやつなんて一つもないんだ。この中に紛れ込んでる。
Hoping that she was wrong, Aoko bit her bottom lip. Flat Snark was a type of ploy that deployed bounded fields. Seeing as it was a commanding so many familiars, it would not be unusual for its main body to have a little or even no defenses. Furthermore, it was modeled from a story about it being untouchable and unidentifiable. It would be logical to assume that it would collapse in on itself shortly after being discovered.
逆に言えば、見つければ私たちの勝ち。
The thing is, you gotta find it though.
そんな脆いやつが雑魚に紛れ込む。木の葉を隠すなら森の中って言うけど。
This was closer to the truth than Aoko realized. As long as there was the slightest possibility of it being hit by one of Aoko's stray bullets, it would not dare appear in front of them. Its true form was orchestrating the park from somewhere else.
でも、どこかに見えているはず。スナークは本の主題だもの。常にページのどこかにいないと主人公の資格がない。
But where? Thinking in the most basic terms, the Ferris wheel was very safe, as well as a symbol of the park itself. So perhaps...
あの子を捕まえるのは？
Her eyes opened wide at the sudden suggestion. While Aoko had been trying to come up with a plan to overcome this stalemate, it seems Sojiro had been racking his brain as well. His proposal was a simple one. If they could not find the Snark, they just needed to take out its master. Alice had not moved at all from the clock tower. Yeah, Alice is just sitting there. Even from here, they could make out her figure draped in moonlight.
それは一番ダメ。アリスを殺してもフラットスナークは止まらないし、このトンデモが外に溢れ出すことになる。だいたい私じゃあの子を殺せないから、よくて半殺しがいいところ。
A breadman, angered at the insults hurled towards Master, moved to attack and was mercilessly burned to a crisp. The two stood back to back, catching their breath. With no plan to speak of and no route of escape, they had reached rock bottom. Meanwhile, the oddities were forming a circle around their prey as if they smelled the blood in the water. Were they to be dragged into a bakery for the oven? Minced in the meat grinder at the butcher shop? Skewered and paraded around atop the carousel? Walked the plank of the thorny pirate ship? After 2 years of slumber, they were eager to welcome their new guest.
一応聞いておきたいんだけど。
何？手短にね。今考え事してるから。
ああ、あの連中が何をしたいか嫌っていうほど伝わってくるんだけど、それってあの子の趣味なのかな？
その疑問はなかったわ。連中の人間嫌いは遊園地の怨念とフラットスナークの性格じゃない？基本的にまともなやついないから、アリスの使い魔って。あ、でも
Aoko wasn't able to deny that there were some similarities.
それは結構。それで青崎の考え事って止める方法考えついたのか？
期待させて悪いけどお手上げ。ま、あんたが殺されれば止まるでしょうけど。
それは嫌だ。とりあえず逃げよう。
しずきくん
She blinked in surprise at the sudden turn of events. Sojiro, who had until now been meekly following her lead, had grabbed Ako's hands and pulled her with him into a charge towards a swarm of bread in an attempt to break out of the encirclement. So basically just hitting the bread. He can't destroy them, so he just run through them.
なんで今の流れでそうなるのよ、あんたは。
Aoko nonetheless followed Sojiro's uncharacteristically gung-ho lead, cursing him all the while. Sojiro would not be able to break through the surrounding wall of enemies with brute force. Aoko regained her bearings and left fly a spray of magic bullets ahead of Sojiro. They broke through the net and ran as hard as they could. At this point, all that was left to do was that they had planned from the outset aim to get out of the park, but not before addressing what needed to be addressed.
なんでよ、さっきはあんなに諦めよかったのに。
Aoko could not begin to comprehend Sojiro's reaction.
ミラーハウスの時と今は違うだろ。いいから走れ。
違わないわよ。あんたを殺そうとした私も、あんたを殺したいアリスも、理由の結果も同じよ、私たち。
Though she wondered what was getting her so worked up, Aoko did not stop. She told herself that the degree of Sojiro's stupidity charging the breadmen so recklessly had caused her to lose her cool.
あのね、一緒に逃げてるぐらいで勘違いしないでくれる？言っとくけど私、明日になったらまたあんたを殺しに行くから。死にたくないってんなら、ここで私からも逃げ出したら？
Come on.
それはまた今度の話だろう。だいたい青崎に殺されるのならいいけど、あの子に殺されるのは嫌だ。
だからなんで？
だって顔も知らない、話したことさえない相手だ。
Oh yes, because Sojiro hasn't met Alice yet, right? Yeah. It was like someone had doused water over her blazing fury. Aoko's anger was snuffed out by the absurd simplicity of his reasoning. I mean, it's very, very simple, but yeah, I guess.
顔も知らないって。
Could it be that Sojiro did not mind being killed by someone as long as he hadn't met them? He was fine if Aoko killed him, right? He was okay with that. But with Alice, he hasn't met Alice yet, so I guess he doesn't want that. Aoko chased behind him, grimacing at the ever-increasing incomprehensibility of it all. Okay. What is Alice gonna say? From her spot atop the clock tower, the girl observed the growth of her familiar. Flatsnark, a savior of the discarded. It was vile, a vulgar fairy tale monster who provided those abandoned by fate with a glimmer of hope before snatching it away. Alice had it under her control, but she was still keen to keep the snark from expressing its bad habit. So what is it? I mean? Is it a bird, or does it look like a bird? After completing a lap around the park that had now reached the size of an entire town, the robin made its situation report. No, this is a different one.
外を目指しているの。
It seemed Aoko was prioritizing the safety of the boy. Even if it resulted wasting an entire day, choosing to not capitulate on a decision was very much like her.
青子のことだから、時計台ごと私を焼き払いに来るかと思ったけど。
The bluebird cheeped in response. Was it denying its master's portrait of Aoko? Or agreeing that it was Aoko's style to do exactly that? An outsider might interpret its interjections either way.
退屈？
The robin jumped at being addressed so unexpectedly. It chirped and flapped its wings like a flustered servant, frantic to say otherwise.
珍しく気があったわね。
It's an egg. Wait, she's holding an egg, right? Is that an egg?
いいわ。せっかくのゲームだし、もう少しだけ盛り上げましょう。
Calmly, she put out a small object from her pocket. It was a dark gray Easter egg, and emanating from inside it was the ticking of a clock. The robin knew it to be a polite kickshaw with a bad attitude, far exceeding flat snarks known to be among the best in one-on-one situations.
いってらっしゃい。称える時間は20分に設定したわ。
20 minutes.
いつも通り、控えめに壊れてきて。
And together with a witch's breath, the egg filled with praise disappeared. Suddenly, a strong wind swept through the park. The words, "I could have killed them all by myself," floated through the air. It was the disappointment of something enormous that was both visible yet overlooked. Aoko and Sojiro continued their dash toward the boundary separating the park from the outside. The curio horde that stood in their way had reduced in number. The never-ending breadman. The iron fence that separated the two from the outside world was just over 300 yards away. Fortunately, there were no particularly large buildings barring their path. If the Ferris wheel had stood in their way, that would have spelled the end, but thankfully, it had yet to reach its full strength. The only things that appeared before them were weak oddities that could easily be handled by Aoko's simple magecraft.
これならなんとか。
She would have said that make it to the fence if her lungs would only allow it. Since Aoko was utilizing the ample mana filling the park, her tank of magical energy was nearly full. Coupled with the fact that the condition of her body's circuits was steadily improving to the extent she would be able to unleash at least one all-out onslaught. Until, above her field of vision, something unusual was hovering. It was locked on Sojiro, hovering 10 feet above him, over to one side. She saw the egg.
しずきくん、ちょっと。
Chotto.
ああ、さっきからついてきてる。
But he noticed it and he was not saying anything? Sojiro had seemingly noticed it before Aoko, hence his previous awkward glances toward the sky. In truth, it would have been stranger for him not to notice, as the thing was practically glued to him. In terms of size, the floating object measured about 3 feet in diameter. Honestly, I appreciate this visual novel for having like CGs like this technically, right? Showing us how they're battling. It's nice to look at it because sometimes the other visual novels, what they'll do is just static images only, right? But here we can see some, yeah, some actual like 3D stuff. Tiles covered its exterior, about which a multitude of spinning lights dance about.
卵かな。
Sojiro asked, not really sure what to call it.
卵卵って言ったら割れる卵。
She's gonna try to shoot it, but nothing. Her bullets bounce off like it was made of rubber. That trait, the ability to deflect all outside interference, confirmed to Ako that this thing was undoubtedly a ploy kickshaw.
やっぱり外からのルールじゃ壊れないか。しずきくん、あれから絶対に目をそらさないで。いい、何があっても見続けること。視界の隅に入れとくだけでいいから。
ああ。
Aoko picked up her pace as she barked orders. The Eggman, who sat on the wall, he would crack just as the tale spoke of Humpty Dumpty. Nothing anyone could do or say would cause him to fall, but at the moment they stopped looking, he would tumble down and break into pieces.
いわく、王様の軍隊でも元に戻せない数の破片。
It was the Mother Goose poem, Humpty Dumpty. If Sojiro was its target, then the moment he averted his gaze, would tumble and explode.
まあ、爆発するかどうかは知らないけど。
Either way, it was going to scatter something troublesome when it fell. Its oval shape, the keyhole adorning the front, and writing inscribed upon it, they all made her anxious. If it was an egg, that meant it was going to hatch at some point. Even if he continued his stare, once the time came for whatever was inside to come out, they would have even less ability to conserve their energy.
青崎、早すぎないか。あまり全力で走ると。
後のことは考えないで。いいからしずきくんは卵だけに集中して。
At this critical juncture, Breadman stepped out to join the egg and block their path.
邪魔！
The Breadmen were marching forward in a grand battalion. At her level of firepower, Aoko should have easily mowed them down. However, oh, they're getting stronger. They're coming back up.
片焼きかこの。
Hard crust, okay. They got thick crust, by the way. Not thin crust, thick crust. Yeah, the bread is evolving. If Snap failed to do the job, that meant it was time for her to put her crest to use. Draw a formula triggered a bullet encased in a full wind jacket. If her previous shots were the equivalent of machine gun volley, then this was her artillery shot. The hard crust bread that had absorbed her Snap without a dent, scattered into thousands of tiny pieces at her draw's torrent. Soldier was like, what is that? Whoa, that is strong. Of course, the destruction did not end with just the Breadmen. Sending bricks flying, the previously paved road was now bare. The nearby stall had turned into a skeleton of steel beams. It was a spectacle that made Sojiro question which force the wall of Breadmen or Aoko's ability to lay waste to things would obstruct their path.
ちょっと、なんで距離取るのよそこ。そばにいないと危ないじゃない。ほら、もっとこっち。言っとくけど、あんたがあいつらに囲まれちゃったらアウトよ。私、人質とか意味ないタイプだし。そもそも区別して撃つとか、そういうのできないし。
This made a lot of sense to Sojiro. He had not fully appreciated the part about the hostages, but he got the gist of it.
つまり今はどこであろうと危険なのか。
あんたね。
Offended though she was by his typical naive response, she could not help but be impressed. Sojiro was a straight arrow true and true. His eyes stayed firmly focused on the egg overhead, even amidst the chaos of the melee unfolding before him.
その分なら安心か。物分かりは悪いけど、一度言われたことはきっちり守るあたり、あなたのいいところよね。
そんなことより青崎、俺の気のせいならいいんだけど、さっきのパン硬くなかったか。
まあね、あいつら少しずつ強くなってきてるわ。大量生産が軌道に乗ったんで、今度はクオリティアップをテーマにしたのかも。しずきくんでもお察しの通り、ここからは手強くなっていく一方よ。あのパンたちでさえ個体差が出てきたみたいだし。考えたくないけど、そのうちジャム塗ったりレタス乗っけたり、果ては合体したりして。
Though she was joking, her eyes were dead serious. Sojiro shuddered at the thought of the situation growing even more dire.
じゃあそのうちミラーハウスの人形ぐらいに怖くなるのか、あいつら。
間違いなくね。そこまでレアなパンになったら、私も自分だけで手一杯になる。ところでしずきくん、ああいうのと喧嘩できる？
Sojiro shook his head, a look complete aversion upon his face.
でしょ？なら急ぎましょう。いろいろ余裕ないんだから。
Alko took a quick deep breath, then began to sprint once again. Far in the distance, though, through the fog, the iron fence waited 300 paces away. As long as nothing happened, they would make it there in one piece. But honestly, they shouldn't have stopped, right? Even though they're talking, they should have just at least maybe jogged or walked to the fence. Yes, because it's very crucial right now. Sojiro followed after Alko, holding onto that all too convenient hope. Because yeah, it's very dangerous. Alice could just, or the creatures, the fairy tale, the breadmen might catch up. But hope was something ever fleeting. It lasted at even 300 yards. The edge of the amusement park may well have been the edge of the world. What happened? So they're there. They got away. But no, there's a big fence there. Oh my god. There's a lot, dozens of undulating horizons could be seen. It's right there, but yeah, there's a lot of fences and you cannot escape that. Crowding the sky like a giant cloud or a thick curtain. Or perhaps groaning lips. It was the end of the road, the outer limit of an outrageous and fantastical realm. And yet, Alko found it to be much like the last page of an enormous picture book. The sight turned her mind blank. Well, this is about as bad as it gets, she thought. The snark, this island of despair, had at last brought Alko to her knees as she stared at the swelling border. No escape. The park indeed had an end. Even now, as Alko and Sojiro had expected it to be, a fence divided the amusement park from the residential area neighboring it. It had both doubled in height and been made sturdier, another hurdle she had foreseen before even laying eyes on it. Expecting it to have been snarkified, Alko had come prepared to demolish an obstacle or two. But this, it is way too much. The construction before her went far beyond a mere wall. It was an ocean that separated the underworld from the mortal one. The iron fence was like a restless, surging sea. One or two walls could easily be toppled. even 10 or 20, could be dealt with one way or another. Between the power left in her body and that which filled the park, putting on a brave front was within her power. She could fully mobilize her circuits and her crest to the point of burnout in a last-ditch effort, like some reenactment of parting of the Red Sea.
でも、それで終わり。
But yeah, I think the ending for this one is I guess they're gonna have an understanding here, because yeah, how can Alko escape this place, right? Insane. Even if a path could be opened, she would not have the energy left to walk it. And it was obvious what would become of her afterward. The residents would hardly forgive her for wreaking such havoc around their park. Like ants drawn to honey, they would swarm the helpless girl and tear her to pieces. Despondent and exhausted, she felt the faint sting of remorse. Escaping the park, looking back on how they had gotten here, Ako recognized that her choices had been her undoing. Under the golden full moon, beams of metal steel bent and merged like a wireframe sculpture. It was only a matter of time before the amusement park itself became one colossal monster. The horde of familiars gathered in the plaza where Alice was had formed into an impenetrable blockade around her. Just above the head of the boy beside her, the whispering egg called Scratch Dumpty continued to shuffle what appeared on its surface.
Aozaki!
しずきくん。
The boy's voice snapped Aoko out of her trance. If only for a moment. The stark reality of the situation quickly dawned on the novice mage. The sheer hopelessness of it all as it ripped out and snatched away any will she had to resist.
ゲートに行こう。ここはどうしようもないけど、入り口ならもうちょっとマシだろ。
What? I mean, you're in the gate. I mean, maybe the actual gate? The entrance?
フラットスナークだっけ？こいつにもルールがあるって言ったじゃないか。なら、これは役割の問題だ。初めから鉄柵は通れない壁だけど、ゲートなら出入り口として機能しているかもしれない。
Sojuro had not given into panic. Aoko found herself honestly admiring Sojuro's ability to analyze his snark's characteristics given the circumstances. Now calm, she steeled her resolve.
そうね。確かに門はあると思う。けど、たどり着くのは難しいわ。一番弱かった焼きたてパンですら、今はもうあれだもの。広場や入り口には、もっと上等なのがたむろしてるだろうし、門だって、あの観覧車以上の怪物かもしれない。確か、大きなキッツィちゃんだったでしょ、正門って。
青崎はゲートには行かないのか。
まあね。それよりこっちの方が現実的だし。
Aoko took another glance at the undulating iron fences. It was too late to achieve their goal of making it out alive. In that case, she decided to prioritize other promise she had made.
今からこの鉄柵を壊すから、あなたはそこから外に出て。それで、私の役割はおしまいよ。
Though her words were few, her tone told the whole story. She was telling him to escape by himself.
信じられない。こんなの青崎だけじゃ壊せないだろ。
私だけならね。でも、今はこの遊園地が味方してる。燃料がこれだけあるんだから、私は重心になるだけでいいんだし。一発でかいのお見舞いしてやるわ。それでも一回が限度だから、穴を開けたら、あんたには全力で走り抜けてもらうしかないけど。
She would carve a path through this iron sea of fences, gambling on one final effort, a great incantation to launch a massive projectile that pushed her to the limits to the extreme. As an outsider, Sojiro could not even begin to imagine just how much of a burden this would be for her. All he could imagine was a hazy vision of Aoko being left behind in this park. What would happen to her? Would that girl in black come to save her? Cruel as it was to imagine, he knew she would not. After Aoko had exhausted her very best in order to save him, that girl would not stay her hand. The only way Alice would let Aoko off the hook was if Aoko killed Sojiro as payment. True. That's why Alice was doing this, right? And so
20メートルぐらい離れてて
50 feet.
準備に手間取るけどその卵の表面が茹で上がるまでには終わらせるから
It went without saying that this was the only path.
待ってくれ。俺を逃がすって言うけど、それに意味はあるのか、青崎。
ないけど外に出られたところでアリスから逃げ切れるとは思えないし
Yeah, that's the thing though. It's kinda like, sure, this place is like Alice's domain, for example, let's say, right? But let's say Sojiro escapes. Alice can still follow him, right? Like, it's not the end. Like, she will not stop, right? Unless they have a understanding.
けどこれぐらいは最後の意地よ守るって言ったんだからできるところまでやらないと
Surprised by her seemingly moral stance, Sojiro saw Aoko in a new light. Ah, but of course. Sojiro realized that she was not fighting for his sake, but for the sake of her pride.
そうだったな。けど、それなら俺だけ逃がすのはらしくないぞ。
何よいいから離れてて
For some reason, Aoko took a step away from him. She was recalling an hour ago how he had gotten the better of her.
青崎、まだ意地を張れるんなら他のことをやろう。このお化けみたいな鉄柵を壊せるなら他に壊すべきものがあるはずだ。
ないわよ悪いけど私は目に見えるものしか壊せないの最後まで形のない希望にすがるとか考えるのも寒気がするいい今はフラットスナークなんかよりこの壁を壊してあんたを足抜けさせるのが私の現実私に負える最大限の責任って
逃げるのか。
Aoko was just about to turn her back on him when Sojiro clutched her hand. These words caused something inside of her to boil with rage. It was as though someone had set her heart on fire. The surprise that pricked open her true feelings and the disappointment she felt towards herself thawed her frozen limbs.
誰が逃げるのはそっちで逃がしてあげるのはこっちだって言うのよ甘く見ないでいざとなったら遊園地ごと爆破してみせるわ
そうか。ならここで俺を逃がすのは無駄だな。その気迫は本命のために取っておこう。それまでは俺も手伝うから。
は？手伝う？それこそ無駄な気遣いよ頭きたいいから逃げろバカだいたい走り詰めで息も絶え絶えなやつなんか使えないわよ
そりゃいい加減ヘトヘトだけどそういう青崎なんか疲れ以上に傷の方が傷んでるだろ
Not to mention the injury to her back that Aoko had nearly forgotten about. Yeah, she got hit by the puppet, right? Even now, she couldn't ignore the pain that the automaton had inflicted on her spine. With iron will, she'd managed to push it out of her mind mostly.
ほら、魔術とか抜きにすれば、まだ俺の方がマシじゃないか。入り口までおぶっていくことぐらいなら、なんとか。
できないことは口にしないで。もういいから言って。慣れているもの、私は。でもあなたは違う。こういうの初めてでしょ。だからいいの。
The fact that they were a team, and the fact that she would still have to kill him after all of this. None of the irony was lost on her as she had said these words. Look at this. So sad. Because none of it mattered anymore. Still, Sojiro didn't let go of her hand. He gripped it even harder. His expression was the same as ever. Aoko frowned, trying to figure out if he was upset with her.
確かに、こういうのは初めてだ。けど、山じゃ危険な目ぐらい合ってる。鹿に襲われたことだってあるんだぞ、俺は。
As a city girl, she had no idea what it meant to be attacked by a deer, but its determination was apparent though. True. Looking back on it now, he had maintained his composure through it all. A normal person would barely be able to talk through such panic. Perhaps growing up in the deep mountains, far from the civilization, had taught him how to stay calm in the face of so much.
だから信じてくれ。少しでいいから。
He spoke his plain, unadulterated feelings and released his hand. There was no lie in him. In fact, he was too honest so much so that she found it hard to believe him. Sojiro had no reason to go that far. As it stood, Aoko had no future. After confessing this and telling him to escape, why did this boy still offer to help a person like her?
わからない。どうしてそこまでするの？私に付き合えばあなたは死ぬのよ。これが最後だからちゃんと考えてよね。あなたはここで逃げるべきよ。
それはわかるよ。でも行かない。
Sojiro answered immediately, realizing that Aoko was looking for his reason. This level of insight in Sojiro demanded a round of applause.
そうすると、青崎が死んでしまいそうだ。
His words were as irrational as always.
だから、どうしてそこまでするのよ、あんたは。
She was yelling out of frustration. After thinking for a moment, Sojiro replied.
そりゃ、君が好きだからだろ。
Oh, she's gonna blush now. Look at her face. Simple and to the point. His face seemed to ask why she would even question him so. There was a pause, no more than 2 seconds. His surprise attack had stopped Aoko in her tracks. Alice was not the only one who had an ace up her sleeve. That line reached deeper than Flatsnark could ever hope for. All Aoko could respond with was an expression of pure shock. It was simple, stubborn reason, the strongest kind on earth. So Tobimaru was right, that yeah, Sojiro liked Aoko. Sojiro Shizuki was indeed incomprehensible to be able to work unconditionally with someone who was trying to kill him. But she felt as though she'd finally grasped a sliver of his true nature. Tobimaru and the others' assessment of him was correct, as vexing as it was to her to admit.
バカね。私はあなたのこと嫌いなのに。
He laughed at her sour grumbling. At this point, he was used to her insults. Their clash of wills ended here. Aoko's blood ran hot from her blazing heart. So what are they gonna do now? If he was going to make a face like that, all she could do was to try and think of a way to get them both home.
私だって逃げっぱなしは性に合わないし。いいわよ。最後まで粘ってみる。それにしずきくんが付き合ってくれるなら、何かの役には立つでしょ。
Though her tone had lightened, there was still hesitation in her eyes. It was only natural. Aoko had not even a clue as to how to begin to fight the snark. If only she had been just a bit more skilled or had trained just a bit more, there might been some way to look for it.
我ながら情けない。せめて正体を暴く手がかりでもあればいいんだけど。
Without realizing, she let her apprehension show. Whining was pointless. She would just have to figure it out by herself, but...
なんだ、正体さえ分かればいいのか？
え？
Aoko gave him a look as if to ask what that was supposed to mean.
いや、だからおかしなものはどれかってことだろ？
Oh, did he find something? Soldier also made a face that suggested that she should have brought it up. I like how both of them has this face now.
わかるのあんた？
多分。いや、結構前から気になっていたんだけど。
Soldier whispered in her ear quietly so as not to be overheard. It was certainly unexpected, but then again equally obvious. After he explained the mistake, she knew right away that he was correct. At last, she had an inkling of Flat Snark's original form, namely... Okay, what are they gonna do? They strategized for 10 minutes. After deliberation regarding the Snark's true form and figuring a plan of attack, the two exchanged nods in acceptance of their roles.
それじゃあ、ここからは別行動ね。でも、
Okay.
ミラーハウスの時みたいなのは勘弁してよ。この作戦の肝はあなたなんだから。開始1分でドジったら、本当に打つ手なしだからね。
But the thing is, it was a fail in the House of Mirrors because the puppet went straight to Aoko though. That's why it failed. He didn't care about Sojiro. Though she jabbed him from his previous failure as a decoy, her voice was bright. Aoko's original vigor had returned to her at Sojiro's discovery of the truth. Meanwhile, Sojiro was also getting serious in his own way. He took Aoko's warning to heart.
ならいいけど。いい？さっきと立場は反対よ。失敗したら死ぬのは私じゃなくてそっち。もうフォローに回れないから、できるだけ慎重にね。
分かってる。今更ながら、やっぱりさっき逃がしてもらえばよかったと思うぐらい慎重だ。
Sojiro nodded, telling her to leave it to him. Though he made it sound like he was holding a grudge, it seemed to him to be the only way of showing her his resolve. Aoko let out a sigh of defeat. Once more, she couldn't figure him out.
ほんと、大バカなんだか大物なんだか。でも任せた。期待してるわ、しずきくん。
She had wanted to say that she believed in him, but apparently that was too embarrassing for her. Aoko turned away from Sojiro and began to run. She had begun to think that maybe this change of pace was not so bad after all. And so ended the intermission. The young cast were handed their new lines. But what of the climax? At long last, this Night of Witches had entered its climax. So we are in the third part now of the story of this episode.
別行動あの二人が
Okay, so let's take a break here as, yeah, they split up. What is going to be the plan? What is going to happen? But yeah, I think, as I said earlier, I think that the only way to end this is a talk with Alice. And yeah, to make her stop, basically. Right? Or maybe, let's say, they defeat her, right? They get close to her. Maybe. If they can. Well, let's see what happens. Or if they get the flat snark. Or whatever, right? But this is gonna be interesting. I like how Sojourner said, the flat out said it like, I like you. And yeah, that was it. But that was quite fun. But anyways, we are gonna continue this and do more of Witch on the Holy Night in the next one. So I'll just see you then, guys. Bye-bye.